So you've heard of people doing stem cell therapy, like when they actually have an injury and they inject stem cells into the body to stimulate recovery. Well, the whole idea with stem cells is literally to bring a new cell, a new cellular activity to life in a given area that may not have a lot of it. So the cool thing is fasting actually stimulates stem cell production. So there was a study that was done at USC, University of Southern California, that found that during a fasting period, white blood cells are broken down in a unique way to actually trigger stem cell production. So through longer term fasting, we were able to get a pretty significant increase in stem cells. Now what ends up happening is these stem cells form what are called daughter cells. These stem cells have new cells that are formed, and these new cells are stronger and stronger each and every time. So each time that we fast, we develop stem cells that heal the body, and they're stronger in the last batch. So it's sort of an evolution of survival of the fittest. The stronger stem cells end up producing more, and it ends up becoming a really great thing. We end up with a stronger body overall. Now, the other thing these stem cell daughter cells do is they express something known as telomerase. Now, when we look at fasting again, one of the main reasons we want to fast is to help maintain the length of what are called telomeres. Now, before I lose you on this, I promise I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. I'm not going to make this video boring. I just have to get this on the table so that you know exactly why you're fasting. So telomeres are sort of like, they're kind of like the ends of your shoelaces, right? Like you have those little plastic caps on the ends of your shoelaces, and they protect the cell. So what ends up happening is eventually the little cap on the end of the shoelace wears down and the shoelace breaks. Well, in essence, for a simple analogy's sake, this kind of happens with cells too. So as the telomere shortens, the cell becomes exposed to a lot more free radicals and eventually dies. So what ends up happening is the telomerase actually protects the telomeres. And what's interesting is that when you have more stem cells, you have more telomerase. The telomerase protects the telomeres, which therefore keeps the cell alive longer. That's exactly why when it comes down to longevity, fasting is second to none, simply because of the telomeres and simply because of the stem cells. Okay, so let's talk really quick about autophagy for a second, because this is a buzzword right now, and unfortunately, it's getting thrown around a little bit too much, and it's getting a little bit misconstrued. You see, autophagy is where you have cellular recycling. It's where the components of a cell are essentially recycling themselves. And what's happening when they recycle themselves is they're recycling old, kind of decrepit components of the cell. So it's kind of like they cannibalize. They almost eat themselves in order to become stronger. So wasteful components of a cell are no longer, because they end up consumed by the cell in a period of stress. So you have to remember with intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting, the whole idea is you're putting your body up to a lot of stress. And the stress is a good thing because it's helping your body get stronger. So what happens is your cells get stronger and more efficient. So autophagy is always happening to some degree, but during a fast, it heightens a lot. And there's certain things that you can do during your fast to help autophagy out even more. But it's important to note that autophagy is going to ebb and flow depending on the individual, depending on your stress level, depending on a lot of things. So I don't want you to think of autophagy as the main benefit of longer term fasting, because that's always occurring. It's just sort of an added bonus. Now the other thing we want to talk about is the high levels of ketones that are produced. So ketones, as we know, with the ketosis fad being very, very popular, are something that are very important when it comes down to helping the body produce energy. Okay, so we fast and our body creates ketones because we don't have food coming in. Well, the cool thing is these ketones actually modulate inflammation. They go through a lot of different mechanisms to reduce what is called nuclear factor kappa B. They reduce what's called tumor necrosis factor 1 alpha. They do a lot of things when it comes down to modulating inflammation. That's why you drop so much water. That's why you feel so good and clean and fresh when you're on a fasting protocol. So with this longer term fasting, you have a high degree of ketones that are produced, especially after 24 or 48 hours. So this is huge, huge benefits, not just the energy source, actual benefits. Now the other reason you can be doing these long-term fasts is because there's huge, huge positive benefits. So there's a study that was published in the Journal of Applied Physiology that found that when you're fasting for a prolonged period, like over 48 hours, you have a 3 to 5x increase in what's called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is like fertilizer for your brain. If we have more BDNF, we have more nerve growth factor, which means that we are actually creating more neurites. We're creating more neurons. We're having this activity that's increasing. So literally our brain is getting more active and we're getting smarter. So this is the main reason why people like to fast when it comes down to getting more focused. We have an increase in this BDNF. So without any more nonsense, let's go ahead and let's talk about how you actually do this whole thing. And I'm sorry that I had to go through to get the benefits, but it's just the way that the cookie crumbles. The first part is how to start your prolonged fast. So when it comes down to doing a prolonged fast, there see, what can happen for a lot of people when they start a fast is they're so accustomed to
My social life at uni has really been enhanced by the events at student roast with the staff and student roast. So
eating regularly and consuming a lot of carbohydrates, that it takes them a good 24 to 36 hours before they ever drop into a state of legitimate ketosis to where they're actually getting the benefits of the fast. So what I usually recommend is even if you're not following a ketogenic protocol otherwise, try to go anywhere from 3 to 5 days of low carbohydrate or ketogenic prior to starting your longer term fast. This is for two reasons. For one, you're going to be significantly less hungry. And I mean significantly, I promise. Okay, you're going to be way less hungry because you're already going to have ketones produced and your body's already going to be somewhat fat adapted. We want the body to already know that it can use fats as a fuel source. So therefore, when you drop into your fast and you're not eating, it's not searching for glucose. Your body already knows fats are fuel, so it starts pulling it from your adipose tissue. This will make your life a lot easier. The other reason is it allows the process of ketone production to occur earlier. So it means that rather than having the benefits of the fast kicking in at 36 hours, you really have the benefits of the fast kicking in almost immediately because you've already started the autophagy effect, you've already started the ketone production, and then you're jumping right into the fast. So it allows you to get sort of the effect of a longer fast, but in a shorter amount of time. So if you lead into a fast with a ketogenic protocol for 3, 4, 5 days, then you can get away with fasting for 36 or 48 hours rather than having to push it to 72 or even 96 or longer. Okay, so this is a very big thing. The other thing that you want to do prior to starting your fast is hyperhydrate and sodium load. Okay, so what happens is as soon as you stop eating food, your insulin levels drop lower. And the lower levels of insulin communicate to the kidney to expel water. So what ends up happening is you end up dropping a lot of water weight, which is great because you feel good, you feel lean, but you end up dropping a lot of very important minerals. And if you don't hyperhydrate and sodium load a little bit beforehand, you put yourself into a bit of a situation where you could be really dehydrated, but not just dehydrated, but mineral deficient too. And that's going to cause some problems with your body's electrical system, which is going to make you not feel so optimal. The other thing is that we have these things called NST receptors, and if we're sodium deficient, those NST receptors communicate to us to eat. They communicate with us to eat salt. The fact is the wires get crossed and you end up craving sugar a lot more. So super, super, super important that you sodium load and hyperhydrate, even if you're not doing the ketogenic protocol leading up to it. I promise this will make life easier. So now it's easy to talk about what to consume during a fast. You see, when it comes down to what you can eat during a longer term fast, it's a lot more clearly defined than it is with intermittent fasting. You see, the primary benefit with intermittent fasting, where you're just going like 16 hours and just kind of skipping breakfast, the primary benefit there is actually coming from a restricted calorie window. Like you're restricting your feeding window, so you're not going to consume as many calories, and you're basically getting this amazingly cool effect where you're dropping body fat. But with prolonged fasting, we're really going for the longevity effect here. Remember that. So because we're going for that longevity effect, because we're going for the stem cell effect, which by the way is going to help you burn fat too. So don't think it's just about living forever and meditating forever. That's not the goal. We're trying to get our bodies healthy so we can burn more fat. So it's really simple. Black coffee is okay. Water is okay. Tea is okay. And then apple cider vinegar is okay. So when it comes down to the tea that you should be consuming during a fast, you have to be pretty particular about it. You don't want to just consume any kind of unhealthy, inorganic tea because it can really have a big effect on your body. And when it comes down to what I consume, I'm usually a fan of consuming mojito green tea. The cool thing is they come in these simple little packets, so I just add them to my water, and it's perfect during a longer term fast. Now, the reason that green tea is far superior, specifically matcha, is because you have a high, high, high level of epigallocatechin 3 chelate, so EBCD, which has a huge, huge fat burning effect. It is somewhat of an antioxidant, but more so it activates specific enzymes and genetic processes within our body that can actually continue to fast. If you look at literature about just fasting in history, you'll see that tea was a big part of fasting. Okay, they would still consume tea because they believe that it has so many benefits that far supersede just the effect of the fast. So I'm big on consuming tea and a little bit of black coffee. Now the other thing is green tea has what's called theanine in it. Theanine helps your body produce more gamma-aminobutyric acid. So what that means is you're going to be more calm, but it also satiates you. A lot of times when people fast, they get anxious, and it makes them So whether you're doing a long-term fast or intermittent fasting, or you're just wanting to enjoy some green tea, I definitely recommend you check them out. There's a special link down in the description that's going to give you a special discount on Evengo green tea matcha. Again, ceremonial grade stuff. Company's been around for 185 years. Really good quality stuff. This isn't just some like random product that's out there. This is legit tea. So I highly recommend it if you are embarking on any kind of fasting regimen. Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about one more thing you can consume during your fast. Some people will want to do this through the lump, and that's going to be salt. I'm a big fan of consuming salt during a fast. Okay, it does provide your body with the electrical system that you really need to function. I know I said that you want to hypersodium load and hyperhydrate before the fast, but you can continue to consume a little bit of salt throughout the fast. You don't need much, maybe half a teaspoon throughout the course of the day for each day that you're fasting. All right, the next thing that we want to talk about is your activity during fast. This is a very big thing. So when you're intermittent fasting versus prolonged fasting, I usually say go ahead and work out as usual. Do a higher intensity workout, get the most out of it. Because with intermittent fasting, like short fasts, all you're doing is just trying to shift your eating. Okay, that's all you're doing. You're just shifting the period of time in which you eat. So you don't really want to change your daily routine a whole lot. I don't want you to change how you would work out simply because you're intermittent fasting. But with prolonged fasting, it's very, very different. Okay, because you are trying to go for a different effect in your body. Here's the thing: if you work out to a high degree, and you work out at a very high intensity, you have what is called mTOR activation, mammalian target rat myosin. mTOR is good because it helps you build muscle and it turns on sort of the anabolic switch where your body can actually assemble protein, and that's great. But that's the opposite of what we're trying to do when we're on a longer term fast. We're actually encouraging our bodies to not turn on that anabolic switch. We're trying to be completely in, well, for lack of a better term, sort of catabolic mode, where you're allowing your body to consume its own energy substrates that are already stored and becoming more efficient. So what I do recommend is very low intensity weight training. What's going to happen with very low intensity weight training is you're not going to trigger a high mTOR response. What's going to happen is you're going to allow glycogen out of the muscles to get taken into the bloodstream and into the liver. And in the liver, that glycogen, those stored carbohydrates, get burned very fast in a fasted state, like extremely fast. So when you're fasting, you're not pulling carbohydrate energy stores from your muscles, you're pulling it from your liver. But we have to mobilize the carbohydrates that are in the muscle by moving lightly. So low intensity cardio, low intensity weight training. I do not recommend being sedentary when you're on a prolonged fasting regimen. Okay, being sedentary does not mobilize things, it doesn't get the process going. When our ancestors would do any kind of prolonged fasting, I bet you they were not just laying down the whole time. Okay, you're up and moving, you want to go through your daily motions as much as you possibly can. It is very, very important. You just don't want to be pushing the intensity. What about some things that you might expect? There might be some alarming things that just throw you a loop a little bit that you just weren't quite expecting. The first one is you may very well find that your blood glucose goes up when you're fasting. How is it going to happen? Okay, if you're diabetic, and most of you are diabetic, you know that maintaining your blood sugar is very important. And one of the benefits of a longer term fast is bringing that blood sugar down to a nice, low, stable level. However, that doesn't tend to happen for a few days. Now, why would your blood sugar potentially go up? Well, you see, it has to do with something known as peripheral insulin resistance. And it sounds scary, but it's actually a very good thing. What ends up happening is the cells inside your body, inside your muscles and everything like that, they end up getting so accustomed to using fat for fuel that they basically just shunt the glucose. They don't need it. So what ends up happening is the glucose that would be around in your body ends up sitting in your bloodstream a little bit higher until it can get used by the brain. The brain always needs some glucose. It runs on about 30 to 40% glucose. So you're going to have the glucose get used. It's just not going to get used at the rate that it used to. It takes a little while for the body to get accustomed to that. So if you test your blood sugar or anything like that, don't be alarmed. It's totally normal, and it has nothing to do with the level of ketones that are in your blood. Okay, the other thing we have to remember is you might feel some colder extremities. You might feel like your hands do get cold, maybe your arms get cold, but your core usually stays reasonably warm. Well, the reason that's happening is pretty interesting. You see, when you fast, you actually have a migration from the adipose tissue, the stored belly fat, over to brown adipose tissue in sort of the visceral fat. Now, it sounds bad, but it's actually really good. Basically, all it means is white fat that is just being dormant and not doing anything other than insulating you is getting activated and being turned into brown fat, where it actually has more of a thermogenic effect. So brown fat, the visceral fat that actually covers our organs, things like that, into that brown adipose tissue to actually generate heat, we get cold. We're getting less blood flow. You'll also find that we just have less overall blood volume in your extremities. Like if you were to fast and like for 72 hours and then go and try to get blood drawn, you'd probably find that they can't even find the vein very well. So you have to remember that, and that's why you generally get cold. Now you'll also find the first 24 hours you'll feel a little bit fatigued. You won't feel amazing, and that's normal. Okay, day 2 you start to feel the effects. The ketones are kicking in, things are starting to work. You feel really, really good. Day 2, day 3 you usually start to feel really, really good because you have a high degree of ketone. So it's just something to keep in mind. Let's talk really quick about supplements. Let's talk about what you should be consuming or not consuming while you're doing the intermittent fasting. Okay, so fat-soluble vitamins are a big no. Okay, so soft gels, so like fish oil pills or vitamin E pills, things like that. You don't want to be consuming those during a longer-term fast. That is going to mess you up. There are calories, from 10 to 20 calories in one soft gel. Definitely, clearly breaks the fast. The other thing, do not take any specific antioxidant pills. So no vitamin C. Stay away from a lot of the B vitamins too that should have antioxidant effects. Again, green tea is an exception because it's less on the antioxidant side, especially with ceremonial grade, and more on the catechin side. I can explain more about that in another video, but essentially you don't consume tea for the antioxidants. You consume tea for the theanine and for the catechins that have different effects in our body. So the thing is, rejuvenation researchers in a journal published a study that found that when you consume vitamin C, an antioxidant, during a fast, it actually kills the effect, the genetic positive effect of the fast. Because again, fasting is all about being stressed. You want your body stressed. And if you give yourself an antioxidant, it gives yourself a crutch. Okay? So you're helping your body out. You're taking it easier. You may not feel it, but at the cellular level, you're making it easier. You don't want to do that. You actually want to make it harder because that's how your body adapts. You're training your body. You have to think about putting yourself through a workout right now. You're putting your cells through survival training, and that's exactly what we're accomplishing here. Okay, one thing that you can take though is, again, going to be the green tea. The Vito is great for that, which is high in theanine. So you can also take a theanine capsule. So theanine is really good in terms of helping you out with that GABA and helping you feel a little bit more calm. But honestly, easier just to get it through green tea. So honestly, your medications are okay. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you to consume or not consume your medications on a daily basis. You know, if you're taking thyroid, anything like that, my recommendation would be, A, consult your doctor. You know, if you want to hear me, because doctors don't understand this stuff. But I have to say it. But the reality is you should always just take your medication. I don't want to be the one to tell you not to do that. Okay. Basically, when you break a fast, you can resume your normal supplement. You don't have to do anything crazy. I don't recommend doing anything wild. If you're going to consume a bunch of carbs when you break your fast, you might want to consume some B vitamins or some chromium, but we'll talk about that stuff in just a second. So let's go ahead and move into that. How do you break your fast when it's a longer term fast? Here's the thing. When I'm talking about intermittent fasting, I have a very specific protocol. Okay, intermittent fasting is, again, the shorter fasting, not what we're talking about here. Very specific protocol where I have people eat a smaller meal and then move into a larger meal after that. Well, with prolonged fasting, it's way different. Okay, so what I want you to do, now this is going to be different if you're vegan or not vegan, but if you're not vegan, you need to break your fast to get lean protein, not much, 4 to 8 ounces depending on how big of a person you are. And that's it. Try to even limit the seasonings, try to just keep it simple with salt and pepper. Okay, I know that's boring, okay, but what you want to do is you want to break your fast with that in the evening time, and then do everything you can to not eat anything else other than that. Wake up in the morning and then resume your normal diet. Okay, I know that this in a way extends your fast and makes it harder, but I promise you it changes everything. Because what's going to happen is meat in and of itself, or a lean protein, doesn't elicit a lot of an immune response. After a fast, your body's very sensitive. So what's going to happen is if you were to consume, let's just hypothetically say nightshade, okay, like tomatoes or something like that, you would have a hypersensitivity to it if you had an issue with nightshade. You may not even know it. That's what's interesting. When you abstain from certain foods, all your intolerances come to the surface. And the second you eat something you're intolerant to, boom, it hits you bad, and it causes a massive surge of inflammation, which quite frankly nullifies the effect of your prolonged fast. So if you eat just a lean piece of meat, if you're not vegan, I have a vegan solution for you, that's going to be very net neutral when it comes down to this process. Okay, people like to go on autoimmune paleo when you're sort of resetting your gut biome and resetting your immune response. That's about all you can eat. You can eat the lean meats and protein, then you go to bed, and it's going to at least get the digestive system going. It's going to at least get the immune system rocking and in normal function again so that you can consume your normal foods the next day. Plus, it's also going to allow the fat burning process to continue more. You're not giving yourself exogenous fats. You're not giving yourself any carbs stepping in the way. You're giving yourself a little bit of protein, but then your body, by far, is going to still continue to rev that ketone engine, and you're going to end up burning a lot more fat over the course of the night too. So you get a huge metabolic benefit. If you are vegan or you just don't want to consume meat, straight pea protein is going to be the way to go. Simple, clean pea protein, nothing fancy, no flavors. You're going to do the same thing. Pea protein with some water, not almond milk, because you're going to be sensitive to nuts too. It's boring. I know it's not fun, but you just went through it fast. I know you can handle at least a good morning protein shake. Okay, so now we need to talk about how often you should prolong fast. If you do a 24-hour fast 1 day per week, you're on the fence of it being a prolonged fast. Because 24 hours is like the minimum. But if you don't do any other fasting other than a prolonged fast once per week, you're going to end up in a really great situation. In fact, at the end of the year, you're going to end up somewhere between like 15 and 20% net calorie loss. So meaning you're going to stay nice and lean just by skipping food 1 day per week. Plus, you get the huge longevity effect. But what I would recommend is rather than doing a 24-hour fast once a week, I would recommend doing a 48 to 72-hour fast once per month. Okay, you're going to get more effect because after 24 hours, the effects of the fast compound. So you're going to get this nice, powerful effect all the way up to 48 hours where it starts to diminish a little bit with the exception of the stem cell activation. So that's my plan for you if you do that. Like you want to go ahead and go 48 hours, 72 hours, one time per month, and then sprinkle intermittent fasting in however you please. But don't fall victim to doing frequent 48, 72-hour fasts. In my opinion, in today's society, it's just too difficult to do it. It's really hard on the body in a different way from the natural stress that we're trying to expose our bodies to. So this was the breakdown. Now, if you have ideas for anything else that you want me to touch on, I'm happy to go into detail on it. But the nice thing is prolonged fasting is pretty straightforward. You just have to have a little bit of a lesson on how it works and why we're doing exactly what we're doing. Again, I also want to give a big thank you to Eugene and Macho for making this video possible, but also offering anyone that's watching this video a special discount on their product. So thank you again for watching. Make sure you keep it locked into my channel and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a beat. See you soon. So what happens in your body if you don't eat food for 100 hours? Well, 100 hours is basically 4 days and 4 hours. And in today's video, I'm going to go through the timeline and